Hi, and welcome to the Complete Beginner's Guide to Pot Limit Omaha with me, Richard Steele. We're going to be looking at river play. Just before we start, though, I'd just like to briefly thank everyone for the comments that they've made on the series. I really appreciate those. And also to just point out that CardRunners have asked me to continue making videos. So if there's anything that you want to see approached from a lower stakes perspective, then let me or CardRunners know and we'll try and make it happen. Okay, so if we move on, the river is, in my opinion, the most important street in Pot Limit Omaha, and value betting is the biggest money maker, and that is magnified at lower stakes, where people tend to call you down more, compared to maybe higher stakes, where we have to think more about bluffing because players are not so willing to call down light. Players are able to think at the same kind of level that we're hopefully beginning to think at, and so basically there's a lot of recreational players, and bluffing tends not to be a great idea, and value betting tends to be a much better idea. So we're going to look at those two concepts and how they interact. I think the point to make with the river there is, if you screw the river up, then all the good work that you've put in pre-flop and on the flop and the turn is in jeopardy. And because it's pot limit, we'll have to play poker till this street. There's no easy option to just dump your chips in on an earlier street to try and avoid a tough river decision. And with no more cards to come, it means our decision will mean that we either scoop everything or nothing. So I guess it's the equivalent of going for, say, a job interview process where all the candidates are weeded down and you just get it down to two people. There's you and another person, and the person who gets hired gets everything, and the second place finisher gets absolutely nothing. So we obviously want to make sure we end up taking the pot down as often as possible on this street. Obviously that's common sense, but we have to make sure that we fight harder on this street and put much more work in on this street than on all the other streets, because all the money that we've put in now is obviously at risk, and it's a win or lose situation. It's the biggest betting street that we'll come across. So any mistakes that we make on this street, if we play all the streets up to this point perfectly and then make a mistake here, we've thrown away all of that good work. So it's really something that I think at lower stakes is absolutely imperative that we spend time thinking about things and thinking about the narrative of the hand. Does the story make sense? And looking at things from both perspectives. So if we look at how we should think about our hands when we get to the river, again, like I said, we should think about it as a narrative. It's a story. And when we put it all together, it either makes sense or it doesn't. And that will help us to inform our decisions. And because in PLO it's much easier to make the nuts, it's therefore much easier than in no limit to second guess our opponent's holdings by their actions. But we not only have to look at things from our perspective, we have to look at the hands from our opponent's perspective also. So if we look at this example here, I think this hand illustrates the thought process when I'm trying to explain what a narrative and a story is. I think this hand explains it quite well. So if we just run through the action, it's a button open. I've got 5 hands on this guy, but he looks fairly loose, aggressive. All of his stats suggest that. Our hand is, it's well above average. So calling might be okay here, but I actually just like to raise because it's just purely a value raise, and I'm not too bothered about being out of position because this looks to be a fairly weak recreational player. So I really just want to play big pots with this guy as early as possible, and I'm hoping that our ability will circumvent our position and just make this a plus EV situation to make the pot as big as possible.